Captain Zephyr Yule was having what one might call a particularly shitty Tuesday, if Tuesdays even existed anymore. The universe, being the capricious bastard it was, had a way of turning any day of the week into a chance for absolute chaos. Today's chaos: a distress signal from a drifting alien dreadnought, bearing down on Earth like a bad hangover waiting to happen. "Well, aren't we just a lucky bunch?" Zephyr muttered, her eyes rolling so far back in her head she was surprised they didn't get stuck. She turned to her crew, a ragtag team of misfits picked up from various backwater planets who she'd somehow conned into working with her. "Who's ready for a field trip?" First Mate Jax, a former bartender with an affinity for sharp objects and an even sharper tongue, grunted from behind the ship's console. "I didn't sign up for this, Cap. I thought we were just gonna steal some alien tech, maybe sell it for a nice profit. Not play cosmic babysitters." Zephyr shrugged, a sly grin playing at her lips. "Think of it as community service, Jax. Saving the Earth and all that." "Earth can save itself," grumbled Mags, their engineer who hadn't seen a comb, and by the smell of it a shower, in months. "We're not paid enough for this crap." "Paid?" Zephyr laughed, the sound echoing through the cramped cockpit. "Who's paying you guys? Because it sure as hell isn't me." The crew's laughter died as they approached the massive hulk of the alien dreadnought. It floated in space like a bloated corpse, dark and ominous against the backdrop of distant stars. Its sheer size was enough to make any sane being reconsider their life choices. But then again, sanity was a luxury none of them could afford. "Is it just me, or is that thing giving anyone else the heebie-jeebies?" asked Rake, their pilot, a man whose reflexes were rivaled only by his penchant for bad jokes. Zephyr nodded. "It's not just you, Rake. That thing looks like it's been through a war or two. Why's it even out here?" Jax asked, squinting at the data pouring in. "Shouldn't it have some alien folk running the show? Guess they heard Earth's got great takeout and decided to drop by," Zephyr quipped. "Let's find out what's going on." The crew donned their EVA suits, the thick material clinging to them like second skin. Zephyr's voice crackled through the comms. "All right, team. Let's go make some first contact. Or last contact, depending on how this goes." The airlock hissed open, and the crew floated towards the alien vessel, their mag boots clanking ominously along its scarred hull. They found an entrance, a gaping maw that seemed to mock them with its silent promise of danger. Inside, the dreadnought was a maze of corridors, each turn a new opportunity for something to jump out and eat them. Not that anything could, given the utter lack of life signs. Instead, the ship was filled with the usual detritus of an advanced civilization, and the distinct smell of stale air and despair. "Well, this is cozy," Jax said, eyeing the alien tech that lined the walls. "Wonder what all these buttons do." "Don't touch anything," Zephyr warned. "Last thing we need is to accidentally start a self-destruct sequence." Mag smirked, fiddling with a panel. "Maybe that's what they did. Press the wrong button and poof, no more crew." Rake snorted. "Yeah, and I'm a space unicorn." Their banter was cut short when they reached the dreadnought's bridge. The crew paused at the entrance, staring at the scene inside. Benches were strewn with alien bodies, their gaunt forms slumped in positions that suggested their end had been neither quick nor painless. "Looks like they were waiting for pizza that never arrived," Rake said, his voice oddly quiet. "Or they got poisoned by it," Mags added, poking one of the lifeless forms with the toe of her boot. "Weird. They all look kinda emaciated." Zephyr frowned, her gaze scanning the room. "Whatever happened, they didn't see it coming. Looks like they starved," Jax observed, peering closely at a console that was still glowing faintly. "Maybe they ran out of food or couldn't eat our stuff," Mag suggested, tapping a readout. "Their digestive systems might be incompatible with Earth food." "Great," Zephyr said, sarcasm dripping from her words. "They traveled across the galaxy, only to be taken out by a cheeseburger. Classic alien oversight," Rake muttered. "Visit Earth, forget to pack the Pepto." The mood in the room shifted as they noticed a large console in the center, blinking with an urgent red light. Zephyr moved closer, her heart sinking as she read the alien script slowly translating on her wrist device. Gravity weapon, she said, her voice suddenly serious. This thing can crush a planet, terrific, Jack sighed. Because what Earth really needs is a giant galactic paperweight, Zephyr chewed her lip, contemplating. We need to disable it, or at least figure out how to. If this thing goes off, Earth's gonna be flatter than a pancake. Mags nodded, already elbow-deep in alien circuitry. Give me a bit. I'll see what I can do. Meanwhile, let's explore further, Zephyr suggested. There might be more surprises waiting for us. Surprises. Great, Rake grumbled. I love surprises, especially in the form of deadly alien technology. Their exploration led them deeper into the ship, past rooms filled with alien artifacts, some recognizable, most baffling. And yet everywhere they turned, the same scene repeated. Alien bodies, slumped and defeated, victims of their own hubris. I'm starting to feel like we're walking through the universe's crappiest museum, Jack said, kicking aside a canister that rolled lazily across the floor. Wish they'd left an audio guide, Mags added, or at least some subtitles. Zephyr paused at a particularly intricate panel, its surface covered in what appeared to be a map. Guys, check this out. The crew gathered around, studying the holographic display. Earth was marked along with several other planets, each one labeled with alien symbols that glowed ominously. Looks like they were planning on stopping elsewhere before hitting Earth, Jack said, tracing the route with his finger. Great. Touring the galaxy, one extinction at a time, Rake muttered. Zephyr sighed. Well, they picked the wrong planet to mess with. We need to find a way to shut down that weapon before someone else figures out how to use it, assuming they haven't already, Mags pointed out. Optimism, Mags, ever heard of it? Zephyr quipped. Mags rolled her eyes. What's that? Some kind of disease. Their banter was cut short as a sudden rumble shook the ship, a deep, throaty groan that sent vibrations through the floor. What the hell was that? Jax asked, his hand reaching instinctively for his sidearm. Rake glanced at his wrist device, eyes widening. Cap. We've got company, of course we do, Zephyr sighed. Because why not? Let's get back to the bridge. We've got a gravity weapon to disable and very little time to do it. They sprinted back through the corridors, Mag boots clanking with urgency. As they arrived at the bridge, Mags was still furiously working on the console. Any luck? Zephyr asked, glancing nervously at the monitors displaying a fleet of ships approaching. Give me a minute, Mags grunted. I'm not a miracle worker. Could have fooled me, Jack said, peering over her shoulder. Any idea what those incoming ships want? Probably not here for a friendly chat, Rake replied. And I doubt they're delivering pizza. Zephyr watched as Mags continued to work, the alien script flashing incomprehensibly across the screen. Come on, she muttered under her breath, eyes darting to the view outside. The alien ships were getting closer, their intentions clear enough without any need for further speculation. They were here to finish what the Dreadnought had started. Got it, Mag suddenly exclaimed, a note of triumph in her voice. Weapons offline, please tell me it's permanent, Zephyr said. Depends on your definition of permanent, Mags replied, a wry grin spreading across her face. But it'll hold for now, good enough for me, Zephyr decided. Let's get the hell out of here before those ships decide to blast us to Kingdom Come. They raced back to their own vessel, hearts pounding, adrenaline spiking. As they launched away from the doomed alien Dreadnought, the approaching fleet loomed large behind them, a stark reminder of the danger they'd narrowly avoided. Well, that was a fun little adventure, Rake said, wiping sweat from his brow as he guided their ship away. Zephyr chuckled, though her heart was still racing. Just another day in the life of a galactic hero, right? Jax grunted, settling into his seat. Hero. More like cosmic janitors, cleaning up everyone else's mess. Hey, if the universe wants to pay me for it, I won't complain, Mag said, her fingers already tapping away at her console. Fat chance of that, Zephyr replied. But at least we live to fight another day. Fight? Rake asked, a twinkle of mischief in his eyes. Or just find the next ship to loot, why not both? Zephyr grinned, settling back as the ship sped away. Why not both? And with that, they left the Dreadnought and its deadly secret behind, a mystery for another crew, another day. For now, they were alive, and in this universe, that was more than enough. HFY stood at the helm of their battered but reliable ship, the Misfit, a name chosen for its crew rather than its condition, which was just shy of catastrophic. The ship hummed under her fingers, practically begging for a rest, but there was no time for sympathy. Somewhere behind her, Mags was grumbling about a malfunctioning circuit board, and Rake was trying out another bad joke on Jax, who was too busy sharpening his collection of knives to pay him any mind. HFY had gathered the crew in the dimly lit mess hall, a room that smelled faintly of desperation and stale coffee. They were joined by two new additions, Rigel Fawn, their tech specialist, who had the demeanor of a man who had seen far too many error codes in his lifetime, and Dr. Lyra Quill, the xenobiologist who could probably dissect an alien faster than you could say first contact. "Right, team," HFY began, scanning the faces that looked back at her, some more awake than others. "We've got a problem. Or rather, a bunch of problems. The big one being that gravity weapon sitting pretty on that Dreadnought back there." Rigel nodded, his eyes glued to a tablet filled with technical diagrams that may as well have been ancient prophecies for all their clarity. "We cracked the basic function, but there's a lot we don't understand. It's an alien Rubik's Cube with a tendency to explode." "Great," Jax muttered, still caressing his blade like a tender lover, because nothing says fun like playing with alien tech that could turn Earth into a cosmic pancake. Doctor. Quill adjusted her spectacles, her expression one of perpetual bemusement. "We're also dealing with a biological crisis. Those aliens were starving, possibly due to our food. Whatever they eat, it's definitely not cheeseburgers." HFY leaned back, considering. "So we've got a weapon to disable, a food crisis to solve, and a bunch of other alien factions who might want their toy back. You forgot the part where we're stuck in the middle of it all," Rake added, grinning like a man who'd just drawn a winning hand of cards. "Right, there's that," HFY conceded. "We need to split up. Rigel, I need you on that weapon. Figure out how permanent Mag's fix really is." Rigel's eyebrows knitted together in a frown. "Sure thing, Cap. But I'm not promising miracles. If we wanted miracles, we'd have hired a priest," Mags quipped, flicking a half-burnt circuit board off the table. HFY ignored the banter, turning to Dr. Quill. "Lyra, see if you can figure out what these aliens eat. Maybe there's something we can use to negotiate if it comes to that." "Sure, Doctor," Quill said, her tone dry as desert sand. "I'll just whip up a universal alien cookbook, shall I?" "Great. Everyone else, keep your ears to the ground for any incoming ships. I'd rather not get caught with our pants down." With the plan half-baked but better than nothing, the crew dispersed. HFY stayed behind, staring out the porthole at the distant shape of the Dreadnought. It loomed like a reminder of every bad decision she'd ever made, probably because it was. Rigel found himself hunched over a console in engineering, surrounded by the comforting chaos of wires and screens. The alien technology was maddeningly complex, like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing and the other half on fire. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, grimacing at the data scrolling past. "This thing is a bloody nightmare. Who even designs a gravity weapon with instructions only a mad scientist could love?" Mags peeked over his shoulder, tapping a fingernail against the console. "Aliens, that's who. Probably didn't expect a bunch of ragtag humans to be poking around in their business." "Yeah, well, here we are," Rigel muttered, plugging a device into the console. It whirred ominously, and for a second, Rigel wondered if he was about to become a cautionary tale. A few tense moments later, the screen flashed green, and Rigel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Okay, I think I've got a handle on the shutdown sequence. It's like threading a needle with a grenade, but doable." "Perfect," Mags said, clapping him on the back with enough force to knock the air out of him. "Just don't blow us up, eh?" "No promises," Rigel replied, a crooked smile playing on his lips as he resumed tinkering with the alien tech. Meanwhile, Dr. Quill was knee-deep in alien biology, which, unsurprisingly, smelled about as pleasant as it looked. She was analyzing samples taken from the Dreadnought's crew, trying to pinpoint exactly what had caused their demise. Jax leaned against the lab door, watching her work with the kind of interest a cat usually reserved for a mouse. "So, Doc, what's the verdict? Did they just starve, or was it something else?" "Bad clams, maybe, Doctor." Quill glanced up, her expression unreadable. "It's a mix of factors. Their bodies show signs of nutritional deficiency, but there's also something else. Some sort of pathogen. They might have been exposed to something lethal." "Fantastic. Space germs," Jax said with a snort. "Just what we need. You think it's contagious, possibly, but it seems targeted to their biology." "We're probably safe for now. "Comforting," Jax replied, twirling a knife between his fingers. "Let me know if you find out what they did eat. Might be a useful bargaining chip, Doctor." Quill nodded, returning her focus to the microscope. The pathogen was unlike anything she'd seen before, complex, malicious in its efficiency. The more she learned about these aliens, the more she realized just how out of their depth they all were. Back on the bridge, Zephyr watched as their sensors picked up more ships entering the sector. The alien fleet that had been chasing them was growing, and it didn't look like they were here for a friendly chat over tea and biscuits. "All right, folks," Zephyr announced over the intercom, her voice carrying a calm authority that belied the chaos. "We've got incoming. Looks like everyone and their dog is interested in that Dreadnought." "Fantastic," Rake's voice crackled back. "More company. I was starting to think they'd forgotten about us." Jax's dry chuckle came through next. "Hope they're bringing hors d'oeuvres because I'm starving." "Focus, people," Zephyr warned. "We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice. If they get too close, we're out of here." The next few hours ticked by with agonizing slowness, each second a countdown to potential disaster. Rigel continued to work his magic, or attempted to, anyway, while Dr. Quill made slow headway on her research. Zephyr kept watch, mind racing with contingency plans that all ended in varying degrees of explosion. She was interrupted by the blare of an alarm, shrill and unforgiving. "Zephyr, we've got movement," Rake's voice broke through, urgent now. "Looks like the lead ship is making a beeline for the Dreadnought." "Prepare to move," Zephyr commanded. "We can't let them get that weapon." The Misfits' engines roared to life, the ship trembling with anticipation. Zephyr felt the familiar thrill of adrenaline mixed with dread. This was the moment, sink or swim, and she wasn't planning on going down without a fight. "Everyone hang on," she ordered, gripping the controls with white-knuckled determination. "We're going in." The Misfit soared through the void, a lone speck against the backdrop of starlit darkness. As they approached the Dreadnought, Zephyr could see the alien ships converging, each vying for the prize that lay within. "We're cutting it close, Cap," Jax warned, his voice steady despite the urgency. Zephyr grinned, a fierce, reckless thing. Wouldn't have it any other way. The Misfit dodged and weaved through the chaos, Rake's expert piloting turning near disaster into a dance of survival. They had one advantage: the element of surprise. The aliens didn't expect a half-broken human ship to be bold or stupid enough to charge and head first. Inside, Rigel's fingers flew across his console, the alien tech responding begrudgingly to his commands. "Almost there," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Just a little more, make it fast, Rigel," Zephyr urged, eyes locked on the Dreadnought looming ever closer. "We don't have much time." "I'm trying, Cap." This thing's got more layers than a bureaucrat's excuse list. With a final keystroke, the console beeped in triumph. "Got it. Weapons offline for good this time." Zephyr let out a breath of relief. "Great work, Rigel. Now let's get out of here before they realize what we've done." The Misfits spun away from the Dreadnought, engines flaring as they made their escape. Behind them, the alien fleet hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks as their prize slipped from their grasp. "Looks like we're going to live another day," Rake commented, his grin audible even over the comms. "Don't jinx it," Jax grumbled, though there was a note of satisfaction in his voice. Zephyr leaned back, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. They'd done it, disabled the weapon, evaded the fleet, and lived to tell the tale. "All right, team," she said, a hint of pride in her tone. "Let's head back to Earth. We've got some explaining to do, and maybe some well-deserved drinks," Mags added. "Preferably something strong enough to knock out a space rhino, Doctor." Quill chuckled softly. "I'll drink to that. Once I'm sure we won't all die of alien pathogens." The Misfit set course for home, carrying its weary crew away from danger, at least for the time being. As they flew, Zephyr allowed herself a rare moment of calm, knowing full well that the universe would soon find a way to ruin it. But for now, they were alive, and that was a victory all its own. "Next stop, Earth," Rake announced, his voice carrying a note of triumph. Zephyr grinned, satisfied with the outcome. "Let's go show the universe what we're made of." And with that, the Misfit disappeared into the stars, leaving behind a tale of survival, defiance, and a crew that thrived on the chaos of the cosmos. The Misfits' victory lap was short-lived, as it usually is when you're stuck in a universe that seems hell-bent on killing you. Zephyr's celebration was interrupted by the discordant shriek of an alarm that sounded like a banshee with a hangover. "Damn it, not again," Zephyr muttered, slamming a fist on the console. "Rigel, what the hell's happening down there?" Rigel's voice crackled over the intercom, as if he'd been waiting for just this sort of interruption. "I'd love to say everything's peachy, Cap, but there's a slight hitch. The Dreadnought systems have gone from mildly homicidal to actively psychotic. Is that your professional opinion?" Mags chimed in, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Pretty much. It's like someone's decided to throw a sabotage party, and we're the uninvited guests who showed up anyway." Zephyr sighed, rubbing her temples. "Can't even have one victory without it turning into a disaster. Jax, stay sharp." "Lyra, any news on the space germs front, Doctor?" Quill's dry voice came through next. "I've made some headway with the alien dietary issue, but a solution is another story. Turns out our dearly departed aliens were about as compatible with Earth cuisine as a cat is with a bath. Great. So, negotiating with the aliens is off the menu." "Literally," Jax said, twirling a blade in his fingers like he was auditioning for a knife-throwing circus. "Looks like we'll have to sort this mess out the old-fashioned way," Rake said, his grin audible even through the static. "Which is?" Zephyr asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. "Panic and make it up as we go along," Rake replied with that insufferable cheerfulness that suggested he might actually enjoy this kind of thing. Zephyr shook her head, fighting the urge to smile despite herself. "All right, folks. Let's find out who's trying to ruin our day and remind them why that's a terrible idea." The Misfit shuddered as it closed in on the Dreadnought once more, like a moth to a flame that was a little too curious for its own good. "Rigel, any idea who's behind the sabotage?" Zephyr asked, trying to ignore the ominous creaking of the ship's hull. "Not yet, but it's someone who knows their way around alien tech better than a kid knows their way around a candy store. I'm working on isolating the signal now. Keep me posted. Mags, see if you can get into the alien system manually. Maybe you'll find something Rigel can't." "On it, Cap," Mags replied, already elbow-deep in wires and muttering curses that could curdle milk. "Meanwhile, Doctor." Quill had retreated to her lab, poking and prodding at alien samples with the grim determination of someone who was far too used to dealing with the unknown. Jax watched her from the doorway, flipping his knife absent-mindedly. "Any luck with those samples, Doctor?" Quill glanced up, her expression as serious as ever. "Luck? I'm a scientist, Jax. We don't rely on luck. We rely on caffeine and the blind hope that the universe doesn't hate us today." "Pick a day, any day," Jax said with a half-smile. "It's probably not today." "Charming, Doctor," Quill replied dryly before turning her attention back to the sample. "But yes, I've discovered that the aliens' nutritional needs are so specific that they make vegans look like they're not trying hard enough. So what's the plan?" "We hope they're fans of Earth food when they wake up. More like we hope they stay dead," Dr. Quill said with a shrug. "Their diet involves compounds that don't exist on Earth. We're about as likely to negotiate with them as we are to find a unicorn doing the Macarena on the hull, always with the optimism, Doc, Jax quipped, though there was a note of respect in his voice. Let me know if anything changes. Back in engineering, Rigel was up to his elbows in alien tech, cursing whoever had decided to turn the Dreadnought into a booby-trapped bouquet of bad decisions. I swear, this ship's got more surprises than a clown car, he muttered, scowling at the endless streams of cryptic alien script. Any progress, Rigel? Mags asked, not looking up from her own tangle of wires. Yeah, I've narrowed it down to a few potential saboteurs. My money's on the one with the most over-the-top evil laugh, right? Because that's totally how you identify a mastermind, Mags replied with a smirk. Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it. I've isolated a signal that could be our culprit. Just need to unscramble it. Let's hope it's something useful and not just an alien's grocery list, Mags said, wiping sweat from her brow. They worked in tense silence, punctuated only by the occasional snarky comment or frustrated groan. Each passing second felt like a ticking time bomb, or several, if Rigel's luck held. Meanwhile, back on the bridge, Zepha's patience was wearing thin. Rake, how's the external situation? The alien fleet still circling like vultures, waiting for us to slip up. But they haven't moved in yet, so that's something. Guess they're not in a rush to end us, Jax said. Could be they're just enjoying the show, or waiting for us to do their dirty work for them, Zephyr replied with a grimace. Rigel, how's that sabotage signal looking? Almost got it, Cap, Rigel said, fingers flying over the console. Just need to, aha. Gotcha, you sneaky bastard. Zephyr leaned forward, anticipation tightening in her chest. What is it? It's a transmission from one of the alien ships. Looks like they've been messing with the Dreadnought systems remotely. Clever little buggers. Can you trace it? Find out who's behind it. Already on it, Rigel replied, a grin spreading across his face. This is gonna be fun, good. Let's pay them a visit and return the favor. The misfit lurched forward, the engines groaning in protest as they set course for the offending ship. Zephyr could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a familiar rush of anticipation and dread. Rake, get us close but keep us out of their line of fire, Zephyr ordered. We don't want to give them any more reason to shoot at us. You got it, Cap, Rake replied, his hands deftly maneuvering the controls. Just another day at the office. As they neared the alien ship, the tension on the misfit was palpable, like a taut wire ready to snap. Zephyr's eyes were glued to the viewscreen, watching as their target grew larger. Rigel, Mags, be ready to counter any moves they make, Zephyr instructed. We can't afford to let them mess with the Dreadnought any further. We've got this, Cap. One way or another, Mags replied, determination etched on her features. Jax, keep an eye on the corridors. Whoever's pulling these strings might not be working alone. Sure thing, Zephyr. I'll make sure they don't get the drop on us, Doctor. Quill, anything from the lab? Zephyr asked, hoping for some good news amidst the chaos. Nothing definitive yet, but I'll keep you posted. Just make sure we don't all end up as alien chow. Way to boost morale, Doc, Rake quipped, though there was no hiding the tension in his voice. As they closed in on the alien ship, Zephyr felt a growing sense of unease. The saboteur was clever, and she had no doubt they had more tricks up their sleeve, but the misfit crew was nothing if not resourceful. All right, folks, Zephyr said, her voice steady despite the storm raging around them. We're going in. Let's show them what happens when you mess with the misfit. The ship swooped in like a predator, closing the distance with surgical precision. Zephyr felt the familiar thrill of danger mingling with determination. Inside the ship, Rigel worked furiously, hands dancing over the console like a maestro conducting a symphony of chaos. I've got a lock on them. Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine. Do it, Zephyr commanded, her eyes locked on the viewscreen. With a final keystroke, Rigel unleashed a counterattack, sending a surge of energy back through the sabotage signal. The alien ship shuddered, its systems faltering under the unexpected assault. Looks like they didn't see that coming, Rigel said, satisfaction oozing from his voice. "Nice work, Rigel," Zephyr replied, a grin spreading across her face. "Now let's get out of here before they recover." The misfit peeled away, engines roaring as they made their escape. Zephyr felt a strange mix of relief and triumph. Another crisis averted, another day survived. "Looks like we've bought ourselves some time," Rake said, his tone as nonchalant as ever. "Let's just hope it's enough," Zephyr replied, her mind already racing with plans for their next move. As the misfit sailed into the void, Zephyr allowed herself a brief moment of calm. They'd faced down sabotage and lived to tell the tale, an impressive feat, even for them. "All right, team," Zephyr said, her voice steady and confident. "Let's head back to base and figure out what the hell our next move is. Hopefully it involves less sabotage and more sleep," Jack said, stretching like a cat that had just woken up from a nap. "Don't count on it," Mags replied, though her tone was more amused than annoyed. "Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together," Zephyr said, a hint of pride in her voice. And with that, the misfit disappeared into the stars once more, a testament to the resilience and tenacity of a crew that refused to back down. As the ship sailed onward, Zephyr knew one thing for certain. They were far from finished with this game of cosmic chess. But for now, they'd earned a brief reprieve, and she intended to savor it, at least until the universe decided to throw them another curveball. The Misfits' engines hummed a tune that was only slightly less concerning than a death rattle as they made their cautious approach towards the Dreadnought. Inside, the crew was a flurry of grim determination and even grimmer humor, because if they weren't laughing, they'd probably be crying, and nobody wanted to see that. "Someone's gotta tell these aliens there's a fine line between a dramatic entrance and an overplayed death wish," Rake muttered, eyes glued to the controls. Zephyr smirked, her gaze fixed on the looming silhouette of the Dreadnought. It was an intimidating beast, like a leviathan out of some cosmic horror story. "We'll let them know if we get a chance, of course. We could always just ask them politely to leave Earth alone," Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, say, over a nice cup of tea and the threat of vaporization. "Tea's got my vote," Mags chipped in, her attention divided between her console and the mess of wires that had somehow become her comfort zone. "Vaporization's such a messy business. Can we focus, guys?" Zephyr's tone was light, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her nerves. "We've got a plan to execute." "Right, the plan," Rigel said, swiveling around to face her. "Precisely synchronized like a ballet dancer on a tightrope, and about as likely to end in disaster," Mags added, not missing a beat. "This is why I prefer knives," Jack said, twirling his blade with a practiced ease. "Simple, reliable, and you always know which end does what." "I hate to break it to you," Rigel said, leaning back in his seat, "but I'm pretty sure a knife's not gonna do much against a Dreadnought." Details," Jax replied, sliding the knife back into his belt. "Just let me know when I can stab something useful." "All right, listen up," Zephyr said, her voice cutting through the banter like a laser scalpel. "We need to use the Dreadnought's defenses against these alien bastards. They've got a system of automated turrets that might just save our hides. And how do we get them to fire on the other aliens?" Rake asked, raising an eyebrow. "By making it look like they are the threat," Zephyr replied. "We spoof their signals, make them appear as hostile to the Dreadnought's sensors." "Ah, so it's like a game of interstellar tag," Mag said, rubbing her hands together. "I'm in, except the stakes are a bit higher than losing your lunch money," Rigel pointed out. "Which is why we need perfect synchronization," Zephyr said, her gaze sweeping across her crew. "Everyone needs to be on their game. Any slip-ups and we'll be nothing but space debris." "No pressure or anything," Jax muttered, his usual bravado tempered by the reality of their situation. "Pressure makes diamonds, right?" Rake quipped, though his hands were steady on the controls. "Personally, I'm hoping it doesn't turn us into coal or splatter marks," Mags added dryly. The Misfit shuddered as it edged closer to the Dreadnought, their sensors alive with data that Rigel sifted through like a prospector panning for gold. "Got it," he said, punching a few keys. I'm spoofing their IFF signals now. We'll have to time this perfectly to avoid getting blasted ourselves. Mags, you're up, Zephyr instructed, her confidence contagious. Get into their systems, make sure our spoof sticks. Already on it, Cap, Mags replied, her fingers dancing over her console. If this goes sideways, tell my mom I died doing something stupid. Noted, Zephyr said, her eyes flicking to the view screen as the alien fleet drew nearer. Rake, get ready to weave us through their fire. We need to be in and out before they know what hit them. Roger that, Rake said, his voice the epitome of calm. Just another day not dying in space. The seconds stretched like taut wires, each one vibrating with potential disaster. Zephyr felt her pulse quicken, each thud echoing in the silence of the bridge. Here they come, Jax murmured, his eyes locked on the approaching ships, each bristling with enough weaponry to turn the misfit into scrap. Hold steady, Zephyr ordered, though she felt anything but steady herself. It was like standing in the eye of a storm, calm only in comparison to the chaos swirling around them. Turrets are coming online, Rigel reported. Looks like they're buying it. Let's hope they don't ask for a refund, Mag said, her tone light but her fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. The first shots from the Dreadnought's turrets lit up the space between them, streaking towards the alien fleet like fiery harbingers of retribution. Zephyr watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the enemy ships scrambled to evade the unexpected assault. Looks like we've got their attention, Rake said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Let's keep it that way, Zephyr replied, watching as the alien ships reeled under the turret fire. Mags, keep those signals jammed. Rigel, monitor their comms. We need to know if they're catching on. I'm on it, Cap, Rigel said, his fingers flying over his console as he tapped into the alien communications. So far, it's just a lot of panicked yelling. Good, Zephyr said. Panic suits them. Turrets are holding, Mags reported, her voice tinged with triumph. They're too busy dodging to fire back accurately. Let's not give them the chance, Zephyr said, her eyes darting between the view screen and her crew. Rake, take us through that space, keep them focused on the Dreadnought. With pleasure, Rake replied, guiding the misfit through the chaos with the finesse of a seasoned dancer. This be almost fun if it weren't so suicidal. Welcome to my world, Jax said, a grin twitching at the corners of his mouth despite the tension. The misfit wove through the battlefield, the alien ships focused on retaliating against the Dreadnought's unexpected aggression. Zephyr could almost feel the tide turning, a shift in the balance that offered a glimmer of hope. Hold steady, she said, her voice calm but edged with adrenaline. We're almost there. Almost there, Rigel echoed, his eyes glued to his console. I'm picking up a lot of chatter. They're confused, but they are regrouping. Let's make sure they don't, Zephyr said, her mind racing with possibilities and contingencies. Mags, any chance we can overload their systems? Working on it, Mags replied, her focus unyielding. If we can spike their power, maybe cause a nice little EMP surprise. Do it, Zephyr said, her gaze sweeping over her crew. They were a ragtag bunch, barely held together by duct tape and sarcasm, but damn if they didn't know how to pull off the impossible. Mags, Zephyr prompted, feeling the seconds slip by like sand through her fingers. Almost got it, Mags exclaimed, a triumphant smile lighting up her face. Sending the overload now. The space around them erupted in a cacophony of light and energy as the alien systems faltered under the unexpected surge. Ships veered off course, their formations crumbling as chaos took hold. Beautiful, Jax said, watching the spectacle unfold. Looks like they didn't see that coming. Good work, everyone, Zephyr said, allowing herself a brief smile. Let's get out of here before they recover. Rake didn't need to be told twice. The misfit banked sharply, engines roaring as they made their retreat. The Dreadnought's turrets continued to fire, the alien fleet too occupied with their own survival to give chase. As they slipped away, Zephyr felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't victory, not by a long shot, but it was a reprieve, a chance to regroup to plan their next move. "Nice flying, Rake," Zephyr said, her voice warm with gratitude. "And good work, everyone. We pulled it off, yeah, but let's not make a habit of this," Rigel said, rubbing his temples. "I'm too young for all this stress-induced aging. Aging gives you character," Mags quipped. "Or so they say. Who's they?" Jax asked, raising an eyebrow. "People who don't live on the Misfit, that's who," Mags replied with a smirk. Zephyr chuckled, the sound a welcome relief after the tension of the last few hours. "All right, let's head back to base, patch up the ship, and figure out our next move." As the Misfit streaked through the stars, the familiar hum of the engines felt almost comforting. They'd survived another day, another crisis averted by the skin of their teeth. But Zephyr knew better than to relax. There was always another storm brewing on the horizon. Still, as she looked around at her crew, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They were a motley bunch, but they were hers, and together they'd face whatever the universe threw their way. "Hey, Cap," Jax said, breaking the silence. "Think we'll ever catch a break?" Zephyr shrugged, a wry smile playing on her lips. "Probably not. But if we did, it'd probably be a sign of the apocalypse." "Fair point," Jax conceded, settling back into his seat. And with that, the Misfit sailed onward, a beacon of defiance in a universe that seemed intent on throwing everything it had at them. But for now, they were together, and that was enough. The Misfit cruised through the void, carrying its crew like a band of cosmic refugees, clinging to sanity by the thinnest threads of gallows humor. The Dreadnought loomed in the rearview, though "loomed" might be too gentle a word. It was still there, hulking and ominous, like a cosmic hangover that refused to fade. Captain Zephyr leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen as if wishing hard enough could make the Dreadnought vanish. "No such luck, but hey, a captain could dream." "Cap, I hate to break it to you," Rigel said from the tech console, his voice laden with the kind of optimism one might reserve for announcing a terminal illness. "But that hunk of alien engineering back there, it's not just sitting pretty. Their gravity weapon's starting to hum, and it's not humming a lullaby." "Right," Zephyr muttered, pinching the bridge of her nose. "So we're on a deadline. Fantastic. Why do they even have a gravity weapon?" Jax asked, twirling a knife as though it could somehow cut through their predicament. "You'd think lasers and plasma cannons would be enough, but no, they had to bring theoretical physics into a fistfight." "Yes, because aliens with sensible armament choices would be too easy," Mags replied dryly, not even looking up from her console. Zephyr tapped a finger on the armrest of her chair, a rhythm that threatened to turn into a nervous twitch. "All right, crew, listen up. We need to pull off another miracle, this time with less nearly getting vaporized and more disarming the universe's most pretentious death trap." "Why not both?" Rake piped up from the controls, guiding the Misfit like a drunken dancer through the stars. He was calm, the kind of calm that came from having accepted one's likely explosive demise. "Because we're fresh out of miracles," Zephyr shot back. "And I think we've met our quota for the year." "About that," Dr. Lyra Quill interjected, her voice tinged with the kind of concern reserved for people about to tell you your credit card's been declined. "If they activate that gravity weapon, Earth could end up looking like a modern art sculpture, and not the good kind." "Art critics," Jax snorted, "always so damn judgmental." Zephyr didn't bother to hide her eye roll. "All right, Rigel, what do we got on the gravity weapon's activation sequence?" Rigel ran a hand through his hair, looking more like he was considering tearing it out. "They're starting up the sequence. We've got about as much time as it takes to regret every life choice that brought us here. In other words, not long," Mag supplied helpfully. "Exactly," Rigel said, typing furiously on his console. "I can try to stall them, but they are not stupid. Annoyingly efficient, but not stupid." "Welcome to the universe's grand irony," Zephyr muttered. "Aliens smarter than us, but still hell-bent on ruining the neighborhood." Jax stood up, stretching as though preparing for a casual jog instead of a potential last stand. "Guess I better start sharpening my knives. Maybe I can carve out an exit strategy. Unless they've got Achilles' heel-shaped exhaust ports, I wouldn't count on it," Rake said, eyes on the controls. Zephyr took a deep breath, letting the recycled air fill her lungs with a sense of false calm. All right, let's prioritize. Rigel, focus on that sequence. Mags, keep our systems from falling apart. Rake, get us in position to do whatever needs doing. And what about me? Jax asked, an eyebrow cocked in mock anticipation. Try not to get us all killed, Zephyr replied, half serious. Jax grinned. I make no promises. The misfit shuddered as it veered back toward the Dreadnought, a metallic moth drawn to a very deadly flame. Zephyr watched her crew work, each one absorbed in their task, driven by equal parts desperation and an unsettling lack of options. What's our status, Mags? Zephyr asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter, or maybe a knife through impending doom. Better than a family reunion after the wills read, Mags replied, fingers dancing over her console. But only just, the misfits holding but not by much. Well, let's keep her together, Zephyr said. I don't fancy floating home in a spacesuit. Not much of a view out there anyway, Rake added, his gaze fixed on the Dreadnought. Unless you like staring into the void, Jax said with a grin. Some people pay good money for that. Yeah, well, I'm not one of them, Zephyr shot back. And I'm pretty sure the void's not taking visitors today. Rigel suddenly leaned forward, a mixture of excitement and dread crossing his features. I think I found a way to delay the activation sequence. It's not pretty, but it might buy us some time. Define not pretty, Jax said, eyeing him with suspicion. Think of it as a temporary glitch, Rigel replied, his fingers moving with a mind of their own. And by temporary, I mean it might send their system into a tailspin or blow up in our faces. Well, nothing ventured, nothing exploded, Zephyr quipped. Do it. Rigel complied, his fingers a blur over the controls. Zephyr held her breath, watching the Dreadnought on the screen with a sense of impending disaster that had become far too familiar. Hey, Cap, Mags called out, her voice laced with a hint of mischief. I think they noticed. Zephyr glanced at her, brow raised. Define noticed. Their comms just lit up like a Christmas tree, Mags said, gesturing to her screen. They're scrambling, trying to figure out what just happened. Good, Zephyr nodded. Rigel, keep them guessing. Jax, ready those knives, you might just get your chance. Finally, Jax grinned, pulling a knife from his belt and twirling it with practiced ease. I've been waiting for some hands-on work. Don't stab anything important, Rake warned. His attention split between flying and monitoring the chaos Rigel had unleashed. Define important, Jax replied, his grin widening. Zephyr cut in before they could get too far off track. Stay focused, people, we're not out of this yet. Yeah, Rigel said, his voice tight with concentration. And while they're trying to figure out what we did, we need to move fast. Time for plan, I don't know what the hell we're doing, Zephyr said, her humor dark and biting. Rake snorted. Our favorite. With the Dreadnought systems thrown into disarray, the misfit slipped closer, a predator stalking its prey, or maybe a prey hoping for a miracle. Zephyr kept her eyes glued to the screen, her mind racing through strategies and improvisations, none of them particularly comforting. Rigel, any progress? She asked, hoping for a miracle and bracing for disappointment. Some, he replied, not looking up. I've managed to delay the activation, but it's like trying to plug a hole in a sinking ship with your thumb. Love the optimism, Jax said, his voice dripping with irony. Hey, at least I didn't say we're screwed, Rigel shot back. Too late, Mags piped in, her own fingers a blur as she worked to stabilize their systems. Pretty sure screwed is implied. Zephyr groaned inwardly. All right, let's focus. We need to disable that weapon permanently. Ideas, boarding party, Jax suggested, a gleam in his eye. Terrible idea, Mags countered. But it's not like we have better ones. Rake shrugged. If we're going down, might as well go down swinging. Let's try to avoid going down at all, Zephyr said. Rigel, think you can keep them off balance long enough for us to get close? I can try, Rigel replied, his voice steady despite the chaos. But they're catching on. Then let's hope they're slow learners, Zephyr said, settling back into her chair. The misfit closed in on the Dreadnought, a mouse daring to nibble at the cat's paw. Zephyr's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a countdown, a reminder of how slim their chances were. "All right, people," she said, her voice firm. "This is it. We either pull this off or become space dust. No pressure." "None at all," Jax said with a wry grin. Zephyr was about to respond when a violent shudder ran through the ship, alarms blaring as the Dreadnought systems began to stabilize, their countermeasures kicking in with a vengeance. Cap," Mag said, her voice tense. "We might have a problem." "Define problem," Zephyr said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Think imminent destruction," Mags replied, her fingers flying over the console in a desperate attempt to keep them in one piece. "Great," Zephyr muttered, clenching her fists. The Misfits' engines roared under Rake's guidance, the ship weaving through the chaos like a leaf caught in a tempest. Zephyr's gaze swept over her crew, each one focused, determined despite the odds stacked against them. "Jax, get ready to board," Zephyr ordered, her voice laced with resolve. "Music to my ears," Jax replied, his knives at the ready. "Rigel, keep them occupied," Zephyr continued. "Mags, keep us from falling apart." "On it," Mags replied, her voice a mix of grit and determination. "Rake, get us in," Zephyr finished, her gaze fixed ahead. The Misfits surged forward, a battered ship with a battered crew, yet somehow still defiant. As they closed in on the Dreadnought, Zephyr took a deep breath, steeling herself for the chaos to come. There was no turning back now, no second guessing, just the desperate hope that they could pull off the impossible one more time. The Dreadnought loomed closer, a dark titan against the backdrop of stars. Zephyr clenched her jaw, her mind racing with possibilities, each more perilous than the last. But they were the Misfit, and if anyone could survive the impossible, it was them. "All right, people," Zephyr said, her voice carrying over the noise. "Let's make history, or at least not become it." And with that, they surged toward the Dreadnought, ready to face whatever awaited them. The Misfit groaned like an old man getting up too quickly, as if sensing the universe's intent to end them in a most spectacular fashion. It wasn't just the approaching doom of the Dreadnought's gravity weapon or the ship's impending structural collapse that had the crew on edge. No, the real kicker was the desperate lack of a decent meal, a cosmic joke no one was laughing at. Zephyr glanced over at Dr. Lyra Quill, who was hunched over a console with the kind of intensity usually reserved for diffusing bombs, or trying to read the fine print on a space insurance policy. "Lyra, tell me you've got some good news for once." Lyra didn't look up, her fingers dancing over the controls like a pianist on caffeine. "Depends on your definition of good, Cap. Remember that key nutrient from Earth's food that the aliens can't seem to live without but also can't digest without exploding. How could I forget? The highlight of our ongoing existential crisis," Zephyr replied dryly. "Well, I've got a theory," Lyra said, her voice tinged with cautious hope. "If we can replicate it with what we've got on board, we might just manage to sustain them long enough to prevent them from turning Earth into a buffet they can't pay for." "Love a good theory," Jax muttered, leaning against a bulkhead. "You know what they say about theories, though. They're like armpits, everyone's got 'em and half of them stink." Zephyr ignored him. "What do you need?" "Time and teamwork," Lyra said, glancing up at Rigel, who was elbow-deep in the Misfits' wiring, looking like he was trying to gently encourage an uncooperative toaster to toast. "Rigel," Zephyr said, "think you can tear yourself away from romancing our circuits to help Lyra?" Rigel glanced up, his face smeared with something that could have been engine grease or the remnants of a very bad breakfast. "Sure, I've always fancied myself a miracle worker." "Great," Zephyr said, clapping her hands once. "Because we're about to attempt the space equivalent of conjuring a rabbit out of a hat we don't have." With Rigel now dividing his attention between staving off their electronic doom and Lyra's culinary chemistry, Zephyr turned her attention back to the tactical display. The Dreadnought loomed larger than ever, its ominous presence a constant reminder of their precarious situation. "Rake, how's our approach looking?" Zephyr asked, hoping for a miracle and bracing for the opposite. "Like we're about to play chicken with an asteroid," Rake replied. "But don't worry, if we crash we won't feel a thing. We'll be too busy being atoms." "Comforting," Zephyr said, rolling her eyes. Keep us steady. I'll see if I can't add to the chaos with a little counterattack. Taking the fight fire with fire approach, except we don't have much fire, Jax said, twirling a knife. Just a lot of sharp objects and bad intentions. Sometimes that's all you need, Zephyr said, her smile grim. And a plan. We need one of those too. How about plan we're probably screwed but maybe not? Mags chimed in, her fingers a blur over her console, trying to keep the misfit from falling apart. Catchy, Zephyr said. Let's see how Rigel and Lyra's potion brewing goes before we commit to any particular flavor of disaster. Rigel, ever the pessimist disguised as an optimist, muttered something under his breath about needing more hands and less impending doom. Lyra, meanwhile, had her mind racing with equations and biochemical magic, the kind that didn't take well to being rushed. Zephyr, Lyra said, her voice cutting through the ship's hum and the crew's banter. We might actually be onto something here. Zephyr didn't exactly feel a swell of hope, more like a trickle, the kind that could almost be mistaken for heartburn. What do you mean by might? If I can manipulate the synthesizers to mimic the key nutrients' properties, it could stabilize the aliens' biological needs, at least temporarily, Lyra explained, sounding more hopeful than she had any right to be. At least temporarily, Jax echoed, clearly unimpressed with the temporary nature of their survival tactics. Just like most of our victories, temporary's better than never, Zephyr said. And right now, we'll take any edge we can get. With grim determination, Lyra and Rigel set to work on their mad scientist routine. Zephyr turned her attention back to the tactical display, her fingers itching to hit buttons that might deliver them from this nightmare, or send them hurtling into the next one. Mags, you still with me? Zephyr asked, more for her own reassurance than anything. Wouldn't miss this for the world, Mags replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. Or the end of one. The misfit shuddered again, the Dreadnought systems rallying against Rigel's earlier sabotage. Zephyr's grip on her console tightened, her mind racing through scenarios like a gambler down to their last chip. Rigel, how's that magical delay coming? Zephyr called out, her voice tinged with urgency. Working on it, Rigel replied, his tone suggesting that he was juggling more than just wires and hopes. We might have a few more minutes than we thought, but they're catching on. Story of our lives, Zephyr muttered. Speed it up, people. Mags, find me something to shoot at. Rake, fly like you've got a death wish. Which part of that do you want first? Rake asked, a laugh entirely inappropriate to the situation escaping his throat. Surprise me, Zephyr said, her focus unyielding. As the misfit danced dangerously close to the Dreadnought, Zephyr's mind was a battlefield of strategy and instinct. Every moment was a gamble, every decision a tightrope walk above the abyss. Okay, Lyra, Zephyr said, glancing over at the doctor, who was elbow-deep in the guts of an alien food processor repurposed for their makeshift mission. What's the update? Lyra looked up, her eyes bright with the kind of reckless hope that could turn a cynic into a believer, for a second anyway. I think we're ready to give it a shot. Define ready, Jax said, his skepticism as sharp as his blades. Ready as in the concoction won't kill us outright, but beyond that it's anyone's guess, Lyra replied with a small shrug. Zephyr shook her head, the corner of her mouth twitching upwards. That's the spirit. All right, let's see if we can buy Earth a little more time. The misfits' klaxon wailed again, reminding them that the luxury of time was something they didn't have. Zephyr tuned out the incessant alarm, focusing instead on the buzz of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Rake, prepare for evasive maneuvers, Zephyr ordered, her voice cool and commanding. Jax, time to put those knives to use. Finally, Jax said, flexing his fingers. Thought you'd never ask. And what about the plan to disable their systems? Mags asked, her fingers flying over her station as she tried to keep them from ending up as space debris. We still going with plan we're probably screwed, Jax interjected. Zephyr's eyes glinted with determination. We improvise. Rigel, think you can handle that? Rigel gave a lopsided grin that spoke of madness and genius in equal measure. Improvising's our specialty, isn't it? With their half-baked plan in place, the misfit lurched forward, a defiant mouse daring to nip at the tail of a very irritable cat. Zepha's pulse quickened, every fiber of her being tuned to the task at hand. "All right, team," Zepha said, her voice a steady rock in the storm of chaos. "This is it. We screw up, there are no second chances, make it count." "Wow, all this motivational speaking, and here I thought you'd just yell at us," Jax quipped, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Yelling's for when we survive," Zepha shot back, her eyes fixed on the looming Dreadnought. The misfit closed the distance, the alien ship's shadow swallowing them whole. It was now or never, and Zepha wasn't the kind to back down from a fight, no matter how ludicrous the odds. "Lyra, Rigel, do your thing," Zepha commanded, her gaze never leaving the display. "Jax, you think you can make some friends over there?" Jax grinned with the kind of devil-may-care attitude that got people killed, or saved the day, depending on the flip of the coin. "Let's find out." As the misfit made its final approach, Zepha's world contracted to the task at hand. There was no room for doubt, no time for hesitation. Only the thrill of the challenge and the desperate hope that they'd somehow defy the universe's grim expectations. They hit the Dreadnought with all the subtlety of a space rock, Jax and the boarding team spilling out like a tide of determined chaos. Zepha held her breath, waiting for the moment when everything would either turn to dust or to victory. "Rigel, how's it looking?" Zepha called, her voice barely a whisper above the din. "Systems unstable but holding," Rigel replied, a touch of triumph in his tone. "We might just pull this off." Might. A word fraught with uncertainty, but for Zepha and her crew it was the only hope they had. As the chaos unfolded, Zepha couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a ragtag crew on a ship barely held together by duct tape and stubbornness, going toe-to-toe with a dreadnought that could flatten a planet. And yet, in that moment, with the stars watching in silent judgment, they were more alive than they'd ever been. "All right, misfits," Zepha murmured, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Let's make this one for the history books, or at least the obituaries." The universe might have been intent on their demise, but they were the misfit, and they had a way of defying expectations, no matter how grim. "All right, team, it's showtime," Zepha announced, her voice resonating through the misfit like a drill sergeant with a penchant for gallows humor. "Lyra, Rigel, tell me you've got this nutrient cocktail ready to roll, or do we have to start writing our wills on the back of napkins?" Lyra looked up from her makeshift chemistry lab, which was basically a chaos of wires, glowing tubes, and what appeared to be a blender repurposed from the ship's kitchen. "Yeah, Captain, we've got it." The concoction should stabilize the aliens' biological needs just enough to stop them from trying to turn us into space paste. Rigel gave a thumbs up, his fingers stained with what was either engine grease or the blood of whatever machine he just brutalized into submission. "Think of it as a cosmic energy drink, minus the heart palpitations." "Probably." Zepha nodded, a sardonic grin tugging at her lips. "Good. Let's serve them a taste of our hospitality. Jax, you're up." Jax, ever the embodiment of casual insouciance, twirled a knife with practiced ease. "You got it, boss. Time to play delivery boy." "Remember, no tipping necessary," Mags quipped, her fingers dancing over her console as she worked to keep the misfit from becoming an expensive meteor shower. "We're on a budget." With the nutrient solution secured in a makeshift delivery pod, imagine a lunchbox on steroids, Jax launched it towards the Dreadnought with a flick of a switch. The crew watched the pod streak through the void, a tiny beacon of hope, or perhaps just a very expensive insult. "Think they'll like the taste?" Rake asked, his hands steady on the controls, navigating the misfit through the Dreadnought's shadow like a cat on a fence made of razor wire. "I'm sure they'll find it explosive," Zepha replied, a chuckle escaping her lips. "Let's just hope it keeps them from trying to squash us for dessert." As the pod docked with the Dreadnought, the Misfits' crew collectively held their breath. It was a long shot, but they were used to odds that would make Vegas weep tears of envy. Any sign of hostilities? Zephyr asked, her eyes glued to the tactical display like a gambler waiting for the roulette wheel to stop. Rigel, his fingers a blur over the controls, shook his head. So far, so good. No sign of retaliation. Maybe they're too busy trying not to implode. Or maybe they're just being polite, Jack suggested, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Aliens are known for their stellar manners, right? Mags added with a snort. And we're known for our discretion and subtlety. Meanwhile, the Misfits' instruments whirred and beeped, the ship itself a creaky testament to resilience or stubbornness, depending on how charitable you were feeling. Any chance we can disable that gravity weapon while they're distracted with their new diet? Zephyr asked, her mind racing through possibilities like a caffeinated squirt. Working on it, Rigel replied, his voice tinged with the grim determination of someone who'd rather be anywhere else, possibly sipping a cocktail on a beach planet that wasn't about to be obliterated. As Rigel set to work on the task of disarming a weapon that could crush planets like tin cans, Zephyr turned her attention to her crew, her ragtag team of misfits who might just pull off the impossible. "All right, Rake, give us a little more distance," Zephyr commanded. "Keep us in the shadow of that dreadnought, but let's not get too cozy." "Aye, Captain," Rake replied, his voice calm even as the ship groaned in protest, like an old man asked to run a marathon. "Just let me know if you'd prefer to park in the VIP section." "Only if they have valet service," Zephyr shot back. "Jax, Mags, keep an eye on any sudden changes in mood over there." "I don't want any surprises unless they're birthday cake," Jax chuckled. "Noted. Though, with our luck, the cake would be a lie." With the nutrient cocktail delivered, and the misfit playing a dangerous game of hide-and-seek with the dreadnought, the crew's attention turned to neutralizing the gravity weapon, a marvel of alien engineering they really wished wasn't aimed at Earth. "Rigel, how's that hack coming along?" Zephyr asked, her voice a steadying force in the whirlwind of chaos. Rigel frowned at his console, muttering to himself like a mad scientist pondering his latest abomination. "It's like trying to defuse a bomb while blindfolded and handcuffed, but we're making progress. I think." "Good," Zephyr said, her eyes fixed on the display. "Because if that thing goes off, we're going to be the ones providing the fireworks." "Nothing like high stakes to keep things interesting," Jax added, his voice laced with dark amusement. "Or deadly." "Ah, the thrill of impending doom," Mags chimed in. "Warms the cockles of your heart, doesn't it?" As the misfit danced precariously close to calamity, Zephyr knew they were in the final stretch. Victory or defeat hung in the balance, and the universe seemed eager to watch them fall. "Keep steady, people," Zephyr ordered, her tone a blend of authority and camaraderie. "Lyra, any updates on the aliens?" Lyra, who'd been monitoring the dreadnought's vitals like a doctor watching a particularly stubborn patient, nodded. "They're stabilizing." "Looks like our little science project is working." "Well, that's one less thing trying to kill us," Zephyr said, a wry smile creeping across her face. "Let's see if we can make it two." With the aliens' biological crisis temporarily averted, the crew's focus turned completely to the gravity weapon. Rigel's hands flew over the controls, intent on turning the dreadnought's might into a harmless light show. "Almost there," Rigel muttered, his voice a mix of concentration and exhaustion. "Just a little more time." Zephyr's heart pounded in her chest, a relentless drumbeat driving her forward. "No pressure, Rigel, but I really don't want to explain to Earth why we let them get pulverized." "Wouldn't dream of it, Captain," Rigel replied, a grin breaking through his focused demeanor. "Give me another minute. Take 30 seconds, Zephyr countered, her tone both urgent and teasing. "We're on the clock." As the seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness, the misfit and her crew stood on the precipice of success or failure. The dreadnought loomed overhead, a monolithic testament to their dangerous gamble. And then, as if the universe decided to cut them a break, Rigel let out a triumphant shout. "Got it." Gravity weapons offline. The cheer that erupted from the crew was like a release valve, tension spilling away in a tide of relief and disbelief. "You did it." Zephyr exclaimed, her grin wide enough to split her face. "We're not going to die today. Not today anyway," Jax agreed, his smirk as irrepressible as ever. "But there's always tomorrow. Let's not get too comfortable," Mags warned, her fingers still a blur over her console. "We've got a dreadnought to deal with." Zephyr nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "Right. Let's get clear and see if we can't convince them to back off." As the misfit pulled away from the dreadnought, Zephyr couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in her crew. They'd faced impossible odds and lived to tell the tale, and with all their limbs intact, no less. "Rake, take us out of here at a leisurely pace," Zephyr ordered, her voice relaxed for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "Leisurely, huh?" Rake replied, a grin spreading across his face. "You sure you want to give the aliens time to send us a thank you card? Let's not push our luck," Zephyr said. "Besides, I'm more of an E-card kind of girl." With Earth's safety secured and the immediate threat neutralized, the crew of the Misfit could finally take a breath, a rare luxury in their line of work. "Well, that was fun," Jax said, his tone dripping with sardonic amusement. "Anyone else feel like they just wrestled a bear and won? More like survived a bad amusement park ride," Mags replied, her fingers still dancing over her console with practiced ease. "Whatever it was, I'd say we earned a drink," Zephyr said, her eyes scanning her crew with a mixture of affection and exasperation. "Or two, maybe three. Make mine a double," Rigel added, his grin as wide as the cosmos. "After all, we deserve to celebrate before the universe decides to throw another curveball our way." Lyra, who'd been watching the alien readings with a careful eye, finally relaxed in her chair. "I think I've had enough excitement to last a lifetime." Zephyr chuckled, her laughter a bright echo in the quiet aftermath of their victory. "Then let's get back to Earth and see if we can't find some peace and quiet for a change." As the Misfit cruised away from the dreadnought, its crew basked in the glow of their improbable success. They'd faced down the universe's worst intentions and lived to tell the tale. Not bad for a group of cosmic castaways held together by duct tape, sheer will, and a refusal to accept the word impossible. "All right, Misfits," Zephyr said, her voice steady and warm. "Let's head home and see what trouble we can get into next. Next time, let's try something less life-threatening," Rake suggested, his hands guiding the ship through the void with practiced ease. "Like a vacation," Mags offered, a hopeful lilt in her voice. "Or maybe a nice, low-stakes mission," Jax added, though the twinkle in his eye suggested he wasn't entirely serious. "Whatever comes our way, we'll handle it," Zephyr said, her confidence unshakable. "After all, we're the Misfit. If the universe wants to take us on, it'll have to try a hell of a lot harder." With that, the crew settled into the familiar rhythms of their ship, their laughter and banter carrying them through the stars like a beacon of defiance against the dark. They were survivors, misfits in the truest sense, and they wouldn't have it any other way. With the misfit cruising back to Earth, the crew found themselves immersed in that peculiar cocktail of relief and disbelief that follows a brush with obliteration. In the dim glow of the ship's bridge, Captain Zephyr Yule leaned against the console, her smirk 1 part satisfaction and 3 parts exhaustion. "Well, team," she drawled, glancing around at the ragtag bunch of survivors, "we've sent a message to the universe. Humans may be chaotic, but we're not pushovers." Rigel, his fingers finally resting after their keyboard marathon, let out a snort. "Yeah, next time maybe the universe will send a gift basket instead of a death trap." Jax, slumped in a chair like a rag doll after a particularly vigorous playdate, chuckled dryly. "I'm hoping for chocolates, or maybe something that doesn't endanger life as we know it." Mags, still tapping away at her console out of habit more than necessity, added, "Or a fruit basket with bananas. I hear aliens love them." "It's just that minor exploding issue we've got to work on." "Could be worse," Rake chimed in from his pilot's seat, still keeping one eye on the controls like a hawk that had been burned before. "We could have been sent on a diplomatic mission. Nothing like small talk with ravenous aliens to liven up a Tuesday." Zephyr laughed, a short bark of sound that echoed through the bridge. Diplomacy, Rake. I'd rather negotiate with a black hole. Dr. Lyra Quill, who'd emerged from her makeshift lab like a mole squinting at the sun, plopped down into an empty seat, pushing stray hairs back from her face. Considering the state of things, I'll take our little biochemical experiment over a meet and greet any day. My patience for pleasantries got spaced years ago. Zephyr regarded her crew, these endearing misfits who'd turned a disaster in the making into a triumph against odds that would make even the most optimistic gambler pause. Unity, even if born from desperation and a shared affinity for gallows humor, had been their secret weapon. That, and a healthy dose of luck. Let's not forget, Zephyr said, getting serious for a moment, that we just made a name for ourselves out here. The kind of name people remember. We might have to get used to being the poster children for interstellar resilience. Great, Rigel tossed back. Maybe I'll finally get that fan club I've always wanted. Don't get too comfortable in the limelight, Mags warned, a faux serious tone in her voice. It's a short fall from hero to scapegoat. True enough, Zephyr admitted, her smile fading slightly. But let's face it, we're not exactly the poster children for squeaky clean operations. More like poster children for cosmic improvisation, Zephyr thought. If there was an award for flying by the seat of one's pants, the misfit crew would have a whole trophy case. Anyone else wondering how Earth is going to react? Jax mused, his gaze drifting to the expanse of space on the main view screen. I mean, we did just save their collective butts. Bet you 5 credits they claim it was all part of some grand plan, Rigel said, rolling his eyes. Nothing like a good PR spin to keep people happy. Zephyr chuckled, shaking her head. They can spin it however they want. We know the truth. We were winging it and we got lucky. Only thing better than a well-laid plan is a happy accident, Rake intoned, his grin as lazy as a sunbather on a beach planet. Zephyr couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Sure, their methods were unconventional, their strategies cobbled together from desperation and ingenuity, but damn if they hadn't made it through. They'd faced an alien Dreadnought, a gravity weapon, and enough close calls to fill a disaster novel, and they'd come out the other side with their ship and wits mostly intact. So what's next, Captain? Lyra asked, her voice heavy with the weariness that only narrowly avoided catastrophe could bring. Zephyr looked around, taking in the weary but contented faces of her crew. Next, we go home, she said. Take a breather, maybe. I hear Earth's got some nice places to relax if you don't mind the gravity. And what about the aliens? Jax queried, eyebrows raised. Should we send them a thank you note for not turning us into cosmic debris? How about a nice card? Something with glitter, Mag suggested, her dry humor shining through. Maybe next time they'll think twice before pointing a doomsday device our way, Rigel added, stretching his arms above his head. Or maybe they'll just aim better, Zephyr snorted. Let's hope for the former. I like breathing. Call me old-fashioned. With the threat in their rear view and Earth growing ever closer, the crew allowed themselves the luxury of unwinding. Laughter, the kind that came from relief rather than mirth, echoed through the ship's corridors. The misfit, creaky and cantankerous as it was, headed homeward with a sense of quiet triumph humming through its bulkheads. Rake, Zephyr called, catching the pilot's eye. Take us in nice and easy. We've done our part, now let's see if we can't enjoy the ride. On it, Captain, Rake replied, fingers deftly coaxing the ship towards its destination. Let's hope Earth doesn't mind a little company. Zephyr grinned, leaning back in her chair. If they do, we'll just remind them whose bacon we saved. The misfit sailed through the void, a testament to human tenacity wrapped in metal and held together by sheer stubbornness. Each creak and groan from the ship sounded like the contented sigh of a warrior who'd just finished a battle and lived to tell the tale. As they drew closer to Earth, the crew began to consider their newfound reputation. No longer just a collection of cosmic vagrants scraping by, they'd proven they could stand up to the big, bad universe and its many doomsday toys. We're gonna be famous, you know, Jax said, feigning exasperation. Autograph requests, interviews, maybe even some action figures. I'll need an agent, Rigel snorted. You in a plastic suit sounds more like a horror flick. Hey, I'd buy it, Mags interjected with a smirk. Could be a collector's item. Limited edition, Misfit crew in all their glory. Zephyr chuckled as their banter filled the bridge, the familiar rhythm of camaraderie comforting after the chaos they'd endured. I don't know about you guys, but I've had enough action to last a lifetime. Speaks the woman who flew us practically into a dreadnought's lap, Lyra quipped, her eyes alight with mischief. Hey, you don't get stories like this sitting at home, Zephyr countered, her smile wide and genuine. Besides, we made it, didn't we? The crew laughed, their spirits buoyed by their accomplishment. They'd faced down the universe's worst and emerged victorious, battered but unbowed. As Earth loomed larger in the viewscreen, their journey winding down, Zephyr felt a sense of peace settling over her. It was the kind of contentment that came from standing against the tide and refusing to be swept away. Feels good, doesn't it? Rake said softly, his gaze focused on the planet that was now more than just a distant memory. Yeah, Zephyr agreed, her voice laced with a quiet satisfaction. It does. With the familiar blues and greens of Earth filling their view, the Misfit prepared to touch down. The crew, a band of misfits who'd found their place in the chaos of the cosmos, readied themselves for the next chapter. All right, people, Zephyr announced, her tone light but firm. We've got a landing to stick. Let's show them what Misfit can do. As the ship descended, graceful against the backdrop of the planet they called home, the crew of the Misfit knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together. They were more than survivors. They were the embodiment of humanity's resilience and refusal to back down. And as Zephyr led them into the unknown with a grin on her face and hope in her heart, she knew they'd be ready for whatever the universe threw their way. Together, they'd keep on surviving, thriving in a galaxy that had underestimated them one too many times. The Misfit might be a creaky old vessel, but it was theirs, and they'd proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. As for the universe, well, it would just have to learn to deal with them, and maybe, just maybe, send better gift baskets next time.